Hello there, and welcome once again to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Meyers. We're here every week, meeting interesting people and dealing with topical issues, and we welcome back a good friend.
Well, a good friend and an associate in the law with me. Glen Johnson has joined our firm as a director, and we'll be talking to Glen about his experience in higher education, his legislative experience, and his Regents for Higher Education experience. He's just done it all.
There's a lot of it.
There's a lot,
There's
and
a lot
I think
of history inside that head
Well,
of his.
this is a retrospective on Glen Johnson. Yeah.
All right, it's coming up today.
But it's sure interesting.
Glen Johnson, our guest today on The Verdict. We'll be right back.
Right now, 6 feet can feel like a long ways away. But from 6 feet, we can still smile at each other. From our doorways and our stairways, from opposite sides of the street and opposite sides of the country. Through fear and frustrations, we can remind each other that we are still here for each other. Because we can still smile at each other. And we're not going anywhere.
Military service ran in my blood, starting from my father, which joined the Navy, on the Chickasaw side, my uncle, which served in the United States Army. I'm Benjamin Espinosa, Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy, and I'm Chickasaw. I went to the Secretary of Defense's staff at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., which ultimately led to becoming a combat support technician for Naval Special Warfare, specifically SEAL Team 10. I think to be proud and to love your tribe, to love being Chickasaw, you also have to love being American. You also have to love everything that America stands for. Equality, perseverance, professionalism, and power. I want my family to know that their father is a good person, but also feels that he has an obligation to the country and to love this nation. Anything worth having is worth dying for. The military and the country owes me nothing. I owe it everything.
See more stories about the Chickasaw people at profilesofanation.com.
When I came to work for the ODVA, I started realizing the opportunity to take care of veterans. It's a powerful thing when you realize that you are taking care of people that made history.
Working here is a calling. It's really, really important that they don't just come here to exist. We want to give them meaning to their lives. We try to make life happy and meaningful and fulfilled for our veterans.
One of the best kept secrets about the post 9/11 GI Bill benefit is that it can be used at a trade school or a technical school, and it doesn't have to be used at a university or college. These are benefits that the veterans have earned through their service, and they should take advantage of it.
Veterans really need to understand that there are many resources offered by the Oklahoma Department of Veteran Affairs. They are there to help you find the right school for you, the school that will help you and your family make great steps into your future.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Meyers. Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
As we talked about in the open, our guest today is Glen Johnson. Glen is one of my partners at Crowe Dunlevy. He has a very, very interesting background. Glen has excelled at everything he's ever taken on to a laudatory fashion. He, in undergraduate school, was Phi Beta Kappa. In law school, he graduated with honors and was in the top of his class. He then joined the House of Representatives, where he served 12 years and excelled there as well, because he spent 6 years as Speaker of the House, the highest position in the House of Representatives. Then he left to join Southeastern Oklahoma State University as its president, and was there, I believe it is 10 years, 12 years. 10 years.
10 years.
10 years, yeah. And then moved on to be designated as Chancellor for the Regents of Higher Education here in Oklahoma. the top education spot in the state. So everything he has attempted, he has excelled to the maximum, and we're sure hoping he's going to bring some of that talent to us. We're sure he will. Glenn, welcome. Sure good to see you.
Thank you, Kent. Thank you,
And
Mick. Always great to be here.
Yes, and I'll walk down the hall more often and see you.
Okay. We're close, aren't we?
We are.
A few steps away.
Hey, I want to get into your knowledge about education in the state of Oklahoma, but first I want to start off with your education.
Okay.
You know, today, if you see someone who ultimately had the credentials that you compiled, you might say, well, they were homeschooled, or they took, you know, these ACT prep courses year after year after year. I'm guessing none of those things applied to your individual situation.
No.
How were you leapfrogging your peers in those teenage years to become such a person who was already academically inclined when you reached the college level?
Well, I followed my dad's career. I actually started off, went to kindergarten here at Sequoia Elementary on 36th Street. And as my dad's career changed, we had a couple of years in California, and then I went from 3rd grade to 10th grade in Washington, D.C.
I thought you were going to say you went from 3rd to 10th grade.
No,
You skipped those 6
That's
grades.
every
in there.
successive year.
Okay.
But I was in Washington for those years, so from early grade school to early high school in Washington, D.C., went to St. John's College, a school there in Northwest Washington. We moved to Muskogee my sophomore year, so I went to Muskogee High most of my sophomore year, junior and senior year. And then from there, went to the University of Oklahoma College and Law School. As far as academics, I always did well. I tried to also get involved in a lot of other extracurricular activities in my early years, sports, and then as I got into later high school, some of the other organizations that student council, things like that, that ultimately.
Were you in debate? And other
I was in
things
debate for a couple of years there, yes, in Muskogee.
What did you learn from that experience?
Well, it's important to be organized. It's important to convey thoughts that will resonate and to do it in a very restricted time frame. And actually the preparation there, and I didn't do that all 3 years, but it was excellent if you're going to be involved in the law and certainly try cases, as both of us have done on a few occasions. Debate was extremely helpful for that, as you would imagine, and just the discipline that came to the table with the skills that you needed to hone.
And you knew you were going to go to law school when you got to your undergraduate?
I was pretty sure. I had an idea. My father was a lawyer, so I'd kind of grown up in that environment. And I would say I was 90% sure from the time I started college, and really didn't ever consider not going to law school. So, and it was a good decision. And frankly, I thought about some other places, but always honed in on the University of Oklahoma College of Law, and that was a great decision for me. I mean, people that last week, Mike Laird with our law firm as an example, I probably on an average week will talk to 4 or 5 colleagues from my law school classes.
Well, Glenn, I want to say right now that, although it might be more appropriate at the end of the show, but the one thing I always hear about you is when your name comes up, the first comment that people who know you make is, he's really a good guy. I mean, he has all these accolades, but more than the accolades, he's just really a good guy. He's a good person. And I just wanted the world to know that that's what people say about you, and that's what I've always known, and we're sure proud to have you join us. Well, let's get back to your career. After the House of Representatives, well, let's go to your term as a 6-year term as Speaker.
Okay.
Talk to me about that and compare it to the regular service, non-speaker service in the House of Representatives.
Enjoyed both. I had, of course, coming up through the ranks, I chaired the Judiciary Committee, being an attorney, and then chaired Appropriation and Budget for 2 years, and then became, when Steve Lewis became Speaker, was the Majority Leader, and then from that position actually ran for Speaker. A couple things Steve and I worked on together in the aftermath. There was a lot of, I would say, negative attention in the mid to late 80s with all-night sessions and things like that. So we put together, my predecessor, Steve Lewis, who was speaker, a set of what I would call house rule changes, but it was pretty simple, like no more all-night sessions. We got to adjourn by midnight. Bills have to lay over for at least a day before you can vote on them, which obviously gave more time to read and prepare for the bills. On retirement bills, you had to have an actuarial report on file 3 days before it could be considered on the floor. And then one that I thought was particularly important, between the two parties, to have proportional representation on the legislative committees. Prior to that, there might be a 30-member committee like Appropriations, and even though the minority party had 30 of the 101 members, they may have only had 2 or 3 members on that committee. So I thought it was important to have that reflected on the committees as well. So that was one of the first things we did, and then as we got into the later years, House Bill 1017 was probably a key accomplishment. I was majority leader, so my job was to get the votes to pass the bill, and it was a major bill. We had provided for smaller class sizes. We all know that all the data shows that if the student-teacher experiences, there are less students, the students' opportunity to learn is enhanced. The core curriculum, the basics, was emphasized, more multimedia and library resources for students. And then we all thought a very important component was moving our teacher salaries to the regional average in this area. So we had a task force made up of business people primarily that made most of the recommendations. The legislature added a few more. Governor Bellman was key to the passage of the bill. So it basically took about a year with the task force, a year to consider House Bill 1017 within the legislative framework, and then right after we passed it, the next year there was an effort to repeal it. So we had to gear up again and go out, and that was a statewide vote. So in many ways, 1017 was a 3-year process, but I think the end result was a solid package that moved us forward. I can't today say it was perfect, but I think it was a good step forward, even a significant step forward as far as moving our educational system to where we want it to be. And we all know that's a work in process. But
state revenue wasn't increasing in those days, was it? Or if it was increasing, it was very small increases.
It was not, Mick. That was with the downturn. You know, we had a major downturn that was precipitated by a decline in oil and gas prices and after the failure of Penn Square Bank. And so probably 83, 84, 85, even through 86, there was a significant revenue decrease. We started heading back up in 88 and 89, but not, as you say, it wasn't significant. It was making small steps.
So putting more money into education, I assume, meant taking money somewhere, or a tax increase. What method was used?
Well, both. Reprioritizing priorities, reductions in some other areas, and then there was also a revenue component to 1017. And of course, as always is the case, that's controversial. It was hotly debated, but ultimately a bipartisan coalition put the votes together to pass it. And again, Governor Bellman was a key to making all that happen.
I'm glad you brought him up, and it sounds like you have a good impression of Bellman. He was in another party, a different party from yours.
He was.
So give us a minute on Henry Bellman and your thoughts.
Well, I didn't know him well when he was elected in '86. As it turned out, one of my roommates in college, a fellow named Robert Gardner's father, was well acquainted with Senator Bellman and Governor Bellman. So we actually made the connection that way initially. But from there, as I worked with him, what I saw, and it's the impression I have today, he was no nonsense. He really was not very focused on party. He was focused on the issue, and quite frankly, he was focused on getting the job done, and he didn't really care about credit. He was, in that way, I think, really the best of what a public servant should be. I think those leadership skills helped us pass House Bill 1017 because he was right down the middle, and what he wanted to do is pass the legislation, not concerned about parties or credit, and I think that served us well. When I was president of Southeastern, I had Governor Bellman come to campus as a guest lecturer probably 3 or 4 times, and even at that stage of his life, he was just, to think of what, here was a fellow that was on Iwo Jima in World War II. He didn't talk about any of this unless you asked him, but came back, really the founder of the Republican Party, the first Republican elected governor in 1962, ran for the U.S. Senate in '68 against Mike Mulroney, who was a well-entrenched incumbent, and defeated him. Great service as our U.S. Senator for 2 terms, and then retired to go back to his farm in Billings, and then again answered the call in his mid-60s to run for governor, and he never lost an election.
We're going to get to a break and be back with more of Glen Johnson on The Verdict.
At Whitten Burridge, we're litigators. That's all we do. All of our clients, some sort of wrong has occurred to them. We try to right that wrong. Corporate America, they have all the power. It's sort of like going against an army. I like helping the underdog. That's what gets me up out of bed every day.
Our success rate is phenomenal, but that's not all they get. We care about people.
I'm very proud of what we've been able to do for our clients, and I'm looking forward to what we're going to do in the future. There's still a lot of wrongs that need to be righted.
OU Law has a history and heritage that are unparalleled. At the University of Oklahoma College of Law, we empower our students to pursue the career of their dreams. We have the highest U.S. News ranking ever achieved by an Oklahoma law school. We are the first law school in the country to launch a college-wide digital initiative. And this year, our competition teams ranked number 2 in the nation. OU Law, generations of excellence, limitless possibilities.
When I came to work for the ODVA, I started realizing the opportunity to take care of veterans. It's a powerful thing when you realize that you are taking care of people that made history.
Working here is a calling. It's really, really important that they don't just come here to exist. We want to give them meaning to their lives. We try to make life happy and meaningful and fulfilled for our veterans.
And welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Meyers and our guest, Glen Johnson.
Glen, talk about your 10 years or so as president of Oklahoma State University in Hugo.
Okay.
Durant.
Well, Durant. I was
get shot for that.
Well, I was at the University of Oklahoma. I was there for right at a year and taught at the law school and was also director of public policy. Had an opportunity to become president at Southeastern Oklahoma State University in Durant. So we were there for 10 years. It was appealing from several standpoints. One, higher ed was a passion. I basically had 2 passions, public service and education. So this was really very, very important to me. And I considered it a great opportunity. My wife, Melinda, was a graduate of Southeastern, so she was literally coming home. But we had 10 great years. I look at probably the things that were most important. The campus was founded in 1909, and so when I arrived in '97, most of the buildings were constructed around that time at the turn of the century, 1909, and so they were in need of either repair or we needed new facilities. The campus was growing, so we launched what ended up being an $85 million campaign that resulted in a new student union, a new classroom building, major renovations on our biological sciences building. We had the opportunity to take a vote to the city voters that by virtue of the passage built a new arena and convocation center, expanded our football stadium. We added a new residence hall and really major changes in the landscape of the campus, which of course helped enrollment. We expanded our aviation program significantly. We were able to get the second level of accreditation for our business school, the AACSB accreditation, which at that time only the University of Oklahoma, Oklahoma State University, and Tulsa University had the accreditation other than Southeastern. I also was really very, very pleased to launch the President's Leadership Class, which we started our first class in 2000, so now we have 23 classes. Enjoy going back to the reunions, and it's been interesting to see what some of those graduates are doing now. They've done well. And then I also started a President's Partners private fundraising program, which would supplement our other giving to the university, and that was a program that still stands and that is flourishing today. Enrollment's still growing, but it was a great 10 years, and I had mixed feelings when I was offered the chancellor's position about whether or not to accept, because I really enjoyed Southeastern, but I think Melinda and I thought that that opportunity was one you really couldn't say no to, and certainly right in that respect. So,
explain what the chancellor's role is, because it's a little bit below the radar as far as the general public is concerned. They understand what a president of a university is, but the chancellor of higher ed, that seems to be a little bit murky in people's minds.
And it is, Mick. Constitutionally, we have a state regent board that is responsible for coordinating all 25 public colleges and universities. We do some work with the private colleges as well, with scholarships and other endeavors, but mainly in coordinating the state system, the chancellor with the state regents is responsible for the coordination and approval of all academic programs. I would think probably the universities and colleges think our chief responsibility is the budget. We administer a $2.8 billion budget every year, which again, you have to be very precise. We have formulas, but in making decisions, obviously a entry-level course at a two-year college doesn't have the same expense as a medical school course at one of our universities. So all of that goes into that decision-making. We administer the OneNet telecommunication system, a major scholarship program, Oklahoma's Promise, which now has provided opportunities to go to college for over 100,000 students in this state. And so we generally administer the system, obviously advocate to the state legislature and the governor for funding. As chancellor, I would meet with the college and university presidents at least once a month to coordinate those efforts. And as we also did in 2016 and 17, we launched a task force basically to map out where we wanted to go for the next 20 years. It was called the Task Force on the Future of Higher Education, where we looked at things like with the online platforms coming in, what we need to do to not be reactive, but to have a game plan where we incorporated the best of face-to-face teaching with online instruction. Certainly, COVID was a curveball, and we had to deal with that, which I think we did rather well by converting on a dime during spring break in March of 2020 from face-to-face instruction completely to online instruction because of COVID, and we did that again in about a 10-day period. So all of those things, the chancellor's role is to coordinate, to be an advocate to the legislature and the governor for funding, but also to work with the campuses if there's a way for them to come together and offer a joint degree program and save money to facilitate those kind of partnerships and interactions. And with 25 campuses, I found that there was never a dull moment.
And we're running out of time, but you left that office, what, 3 years ago, 2 years
really
ago?
about a year, well, almost two now, November of 2021. So,
okay. Well, Glen, thanks for your service
You bet.
and all of the knowledge you've accumulated throughout the legislature and also in higher ed. Really appreciate your work.
Thank you. And I always enjoy being on this program.
All right. Well, I'm sure we'll have you back again. You heard him. He said he
I
enjoyed
did.
being on here. All right. Kent and I'll be back with a final word after this.
This is the epidemic of my generation. This is my HIV. This is my Black Plague.
In the midst of one of our state's largest crises,
Oklahomans are dying from this preventable and treatable disease on a daily basis.
We believe there's hope.
That little pill will cause destruction through your whole life.
Watch the entire award-winning 9-part docuseries Killing Pain, made available by Fighting Addiction Through Education at killingpain.com.
It used to be okay in teachers' lounges. It used to be okay in maternity wards. It was okay in sporting arenas, college campuses, and office spaces. But now that we understand the deadly dangers of secondhand smoke, that's not okay anymore. So why is it okay that thousands of employees are exposed to it every day at work? Bottom line, it's not okay. Let's protect hardworking Oklahomans. Join the fight at stopswithme.com.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
I think for us, once we got started and we began to see the tremendous need just within our state, it really was just a calling for us. The blessings far outweigh any obstacles that we've faced.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
We're back on The Verdict, wrapping up a show with former Chancellor and former President of Southeastern Oklahoma, Glen Johnson.
Speaker of the House.
Speaker of the House.
His honors go on and on, and he's
those
just
little things like that.
He's achieved a lot.
Yeah, he certainly has. We really appreciate Glen lending his service and also lending his time to our show. I was surprised to see he's been on the show 11 times.
Yes.
And think how many different roles he's had through the years when he's been so kind to come out here and be a part of it. So we really appreciate Glen coming on. You can get more information about Glen and the other attorneys who work at CroweDunlevy.com, which is Glen's new professional address. And we have a website. It's theverdict.tv. You can tell us about a guest you'd like to see or someone you'd like to see us discuss. We'll see you next week.